that, okay, these are the best practices in this particular domain, and if you want to do this, here is a set of guidance, please use these, but without any specific mandate coming therewith. Then policies can be all pervasive or selective. For example, you may say that this policy shall be applicable all over the country. You may say that this policy shall be applicable only to Delhi. So there could be geographical type of thing. You can also say that this policy shall apply to all the government companies. You can also say that this policy shall apply to everybody at large. Okay, things like that. So the policy domain itself can keep on varying depending on the context. Now, as I said earlier, public policy is one aspect. However, when you are looking at in a broader context, public policy is not alone by itself. You have few other things also that work along with the public policy. So you may have a new legislations along with the public policy. You may also have things like existing legislation that may need amendment, or they may be undergoing amendment, or they may be amended in future, things like that. You may also have a situation that the government of the day can use an ordinance route, that is without going through the legislature. It can just notify a particular ordinance, and through that a new policy can be enabled or restricted, as the case may be. Then we also have a situation which is known as subordinate legislation. So you may have a broad policy, or let's say a legislation, but within that legislation, because for the legislation it has to go to the House of the Parliament, people need to debate, pass, etc. But then that regulation, that legislation itself, that particular act may empower the government or certain other agencies within the government to notify certain rules, regulations, guidelines, standards, etc. And then those types of things can come up through this particular route, which is known as subordinate legislation, where again there is no mandate for these to be passed by the Parliament, but yes, they have to be tabled on the House of the Parliament. And of course, in case of subordinate legislation, the Parliament can even intervene if they don't like certain aspects of that. Then we have within the policies often some sort of mechanism for oversight, monitoring, evaluation, and review. Because policy may be very broad. It can say, okay, that everything will be accessible. However, the policy has to have certain mechanisms, certain governance mechanisms in terms of who are the people who will ensure that, yes, this is what happens, so that's the oversight. Who are the people who are monitoring what is the progress from time to time across different sectors, etc. What is the objective and tangible criteria that are being used for evaluation of these types of practices, and then taking a review of that and again taking a corrective action as the case may be. The policy may also have a provision for self-regulation. For example, the policy may say that this is what needs to be done. At the same time, depending on the users or the industry or the civil society, etc., it may also give them a leeway that, okay, you can come up with your own standards or your own consensus-based something, and based on that, the policy can enable still that type of thing. Now let's look at briefly the global evolution of ICT accessibility policy. So although it was many years back that the UN does keep coming up with this year of children, year of disabled persons and things like that. So it was many years back that it had happened, almost 3 decades back in fact. However, the most important thing which had happened was in 2006, because of course in 2000 itself, Mexico was the country that had taken the suggestion to the United Nations that there must be some such thing, a specific convention on this. And then we had this UN conventions for the rights of the peoples with disabilities, which was passed by the UN in 2006 end. It opened for signing on 30th March 2007. And I'm saying very specifically, and on the next slide, I'll say why I'm saying the date also 30th March 2007, that it became open for people to sign and then of course later to ratify as well. So although a lot of things were already happening within the ICT space, within the industry, by the users, as well as from the government side, this particular convention actually brought things into focus. Because if you look at Article 1, it has the definition of disabilities. If you look at Article 9 and Article 21, these two specific things have a lot of relationship with ICT. And then, of course, we also had the definition of universal design within this particular convention. So together, it became a very important and powerful tool and instrument to bring focus towards using of ICT. It should also not be surprising for us to remember that this was in 2006-2007, which was also a time when mobile telephony as well as internet and broadband were also expanding throughout the world at a very fast pace, especially in developing countries. And a lot of people looked at ICT as one of the means to enhance the accessibility for people with disabilities. And when we are looking at ICT and accessibility, I think there are broadly two ways to look at it. One is, how do we make ICT products and services themselves more and more accessible? So whether it's a computer or a mobile phone or a radio or a television or internet itself, let's say a website, how do we make it accessible, etc. That is one type of use of ICT, and that's definitely we should look at. But I think more importantly, and in a much broader context, what we need to look at is, how do we use information and communication technologies to help people in other domains as well? For example, a physical bank may be inaccessible for certain historical reasons. It could be in a building which is not accessible. So that becomes a challenge for many people in that situation. However, if the ATM machine is accessible, that still extends the facility of banking to a whole lot of more people than it could have otherwise achieved. Similarly, if you look at something like an internet banking or a mobile banking, instead of having people to move out and go up to an ATM or to a branch, it can enable them to do a banking wherever they are on whatever they are doing. And this is how I would say that we should look at ICT in two different aspects. Now, when I look at ICT accessibility policy in India itself, so one is that we have these fundamental rights which have been enshrined in our constitution, which include the right to life and liberty, which includes right to equality and others. We do have the Persons with Disabilities Act, which came into force in 1995. India signed this particular convention on 30th March 2007, which is exactly the first day of this particular convention being opened for signature. As I said earlier, it was finalized in 2006, but the first day that it could be signed was 30th March 2007. India was one of the countries to do that on that day itself. And it also ratified the same convention on 1st October 2007. So India was actually the 7th country in the world to do so. If you look at what is the current policy situation, so we have the 12th five-year plan. Approach paper has already been released by the Planning Commission. And what is the goal of the Planning Commission? What is the underlying philosophy of that 12th five-year plan? It is faster and more inclusive growth. And when we are talking about inclusive growth, we need to ensure that we include everybody, including the people with disabilities, into that particular growth paradox. Because without that, we may have a growth, but it will not be equitable, it will not be sustainable, it will not be inclusive. So that's one major thing that we should look at. Then we also have these three ICT draft policies that were released by the government in October 2011 on 4th, 7th and 11th October respectively on electronics, IT and telecom. Although accessibility is not specifically mentioned there, in our response we have mentioned, several other people have also responded, that this bigger ICT policy framework should also guide the ICT accessibility policy that is under development within the government. And then let me just talk a little bit about what is the current status of India's ICT accessibility policy. So first of all, it is called not just ICT, it is called ICT and electronics. So it is called Information and Communication Technology and Electronics Accessibility Policy. I can't say the year because it's been in the making for some time. So in 2009, as I mentioned right in the beginning, in January 2009, we had the first meeting when this whole discussion started happening. After that, the government had formed a small group. I feel fortunate as well as privileged to be part of that particular working group. Right from 2009 till 2010, we had multiple rounds of meetings with people from industry, from the government, from civil society. And we started drafting. So first of all, there was a discussion whether we need a policy of this sort or not. It was decided that yes, we do need. And then the second question was, where should this particular policy be framed? So then it was decided within the government that it should be done in Department of IT. Then the third thing was, okay, what should be the broad contours of this policy? And we started working on that. We submitted our draft to the government in 2010, this particular working group. We had many more rounds of meeting within the government. And then between 2010 and 2011, the government did 2 rounds of public consultation on this draft policy. We understand that they have also got inputs from other governments, bodies within the government. So that means the several central government agencies and departments, including the Ministry of Social Justice and Welfare, very important stakeholder in this whole domain, and also the state governments. So that stage is over, and now we are waiting for the final policy to be published, and I just hope that it happens sooner than later. Thank you. We have time for a few questions. So questions or comments, please.
Deepak Maheshwari, sir. I am Dr. Matthew Martin from National Institute for Hearing Handicap, Mumbai. I'd like to ask you one particular precise question. It's regarding the draft policy that you have prepared. Is there a component of entertainment, education, and information in this policy regard to accessibility? Because communication or media as such, is it being touched upon? Because aim of media is information, communication, and entertainment. Is it being included? Because per se or by default, all the technologies that are modern technology available, whether it is YouTube, website, everybody is offering some kind of media component in them for communication, education, and entertainment. Is all these 3 components present in the accessibility policy draft that you have framed?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Martin. I don't remember offhand whether entertainment per se is included in as a term there. However, awareness and education have definitely been included there. Also, I do recall that there's a specific mention about making the websites accessible. And the moment we are saying websites accessible, that means all the content which is available on that particular website should be accessible.
Okay.
But this particular policy is available still on the Department of IT's website. And by the way, Department of IT's website is one of the few accessible websites in this, few government websites. So you can, it is available, if you go to the home page, you go to what's new. Of course, earlier it was right up there. And then you can scroll down. And I think the last version that was released was in March or January 2011. That was the last version that was released for public consultation.
Second question is regarding electronics, because it is to the policy regarding information communication and technology.
And electronics,
yes. Now, today in the country, there are no television sets which has got closed captioning or captioning system being provided in the country in terms of electronic technology as such. Is there any kind of policy framework that works on?
So this particular
because
policy...
accessibility means a preference for choice. I should be able to see a film in Tamil or produced in Tamil language in Malayalam. That provision is not there. Whereas in the other part of the world, it is available. We can watch an English movie in Chinese or Japanese or in French language, but that is not being provided in the country despite of technology growth and development in the country. For example, recently Robot, the film was telecast in world over, but for our country, it was not captioned. Whereas it was captioned in Bombay, but for the rest of the world and not India. Why this kind of discrimination?
I do not know what the reason for this is, but I do know for sure that there's a lot of work which is being supported by the Department of IT, as well as a lot of work which is happening within the industry about this type of captioning or subtitling of the content in different languages. And with the latest notification, which now mandates the digitalization of all the cable networks in the country. So, for example, for all the metros, June 2012 is the deadline, which is just less than 5 months away now. Once those types of things are happening, the moment the digital networks come into play from terms of end-to-end delivery, I think at that point of time, a lot of other people will also see this particular opportunity. And this is not just for people with accessibility challenges per se. It could also be useful for people, let's say if there's a person who knows, whose mother tongue is Malayalam, and if that person lives in Delhi or in Srinagar, should also be in a position to watch those programs in that particular language. I think that's a broader context in which you are framing this particular comment.
Exactly, sir.
Yeah.
So,
So I'm not aware of what the exact situation on that is, but this particular policy, it does include electronics products as well.
Okay, thank you.
That much I can tell you.
Thank you, sir.
Is there any other question or comment? Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Over there. Can just get the mic to the gentleman over there.
I'm Stephen King, from the president of the DAISY Consortium, which is a global organization. How can people with disabilities in India better engage with public policy and the development of public policy?
I would say three things. Number one, the government should take an initiative in terms of making all its websites accessible, because